It is so nice to have you here with us again and so satisfactory to join us as a big family that celebrates every 2 weeks with the single purpose of having healthier lives, families, and communities. During all the sessions, DFW tries to find alternatives for safe, affordable, and efficient therapies that target two health issues, but above all, to take preventive actions. My name is Raul Pineda, biochemist, DFW's General Secretary, and today we have invited an amazing friend and who shall join us any moment as co-host and co-presenter today, Dr. Patricia Calisperis, medical doctor, traumatologist, pediatric surgeon, and integrative doctor. Um, but as she hasn't joined us today, then I'm going to continue. Today is a very special occasion for many reasons. The first one is for your interest. The second, for the opportunity to share this introductory message with a great friend for the last years. So I'm pleased to introduce this session today. Let me welcome everyone to this seventh academic session of 2025 and 103rd DFW Federation Conference Week. Today, May 25th, 2025, we have the opportunity to have a different but unique academic session that is for sure going to bring us fascinating, interesting, and innovative message to our audience. We are streaming live from Zoom platform with a maximum capacity of 100 attendees. So let me emphasize for all those who connect later, you can also reach us throughout our Facebook, Instagram, and formerly Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube Doctors Federation for the World channels. Please share these with colleagues, friends, and family. You will find at the bottom of your screen a global interpretation logo where you can choose the interpretation according to the flag or language of your choice. For Hindi language, the Zoom platform has not yet included the Indian flag, so we have to choose the closest and the busiest neighboring country, which is China. We apologize for this inconvenience. So let me share my screen and share with you a very short presentations about our legacy as a organization. Doctors Federation for the World, in short, DFW, is an international organization that over the last 5 years has played productive and important roles in 5 continents. DFW has built hope and broken paradigms. Founded in 2020 in Piedmont, Italy, by Dr. Fanny Casallo, DFW is a non-profit organization which has been endorsed by numerous health specialists from all over the world. Our aim is to address acute and chronic diseases from a pathophysiological point of view, with a long-term approach in which people from 5 continents participate on voluntary basis. Our innovative, disruptive, and constructive strength has enabled real-time interdisciplinary communication and work from health specialists with simultaneous translation into 4 languages, sometimes 8: English, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, French, and Hindi. Our mission is focused on providing integrative health solutions for human well-being. Our vision is to become the leading organization in which we are searching for safe, accessible, effective, and efficient treatments, as well as preventive intervention. Our values seek plurality and open equality of all ideas and humanity. Our objectives focus on the generation of solutions of long-term value, as well as close collaboration between clinicians, researchers, and general public. Finally, our activities have focused on both the communication of monthly preventive health schemes as well as interdisciplinary work with authorities and governments. Our physicians around the globe have been using evidence-based medicine approaches to give feedback to their governments and societies regarding preventive and curative schemes. In this way, we have held 122 lectures with the following profile of speakers: 59 with doctorate level, 43 with master's degree and specialty, 27 with bachelor's degree. With respect to our worldwide influence, the FW has held 61 in or from America, 37 from Europe, 11 from Africa, 16 from Asia, and 6 from Oceania. DFW is a proactive organization that is recognized for its deep proactive approach to community and long-term collaborative work with governments. It is respectful of local health decisions in each country. It doesn't seek confrontation, deterioration of any status quo, nor the disruption of current health agendas. We focused on doctors, academics, researchers, and other health professional allies. In addition, we target government authorities, health systems, regulatory offices, social media, intellectuals, philanthropists, and civil society. Thanks to the above, in 2022, we managed to integrate our progress in a very successful and unprecedented international summit that took place virtually from November 11th to 15th, 2022. Thanks to your participation, we integrated the most transcendental academic program in the history of mankind, as it was the largest, including 127 speakers, very ambitious, with 73 countries, collaborative, including 4 pillars, plural, in 5 continents, and measurable, as well as multilingual, including 5 languages in simultaneous translations. There, specialists from all over the world share their knowledge on various health topics with the sole aim of improving the living conditions and health from or of the world's population. As you know, our management is based on 4 main axes or pillars. The first one, clinical practice guidelines. The second, traditional and integrative medicine. The third, wide impact on communities at risk. And last but not least, public policies in crisis situations. Finally, DFW is concentrating on strengthening its structure, consolidating its objectives, supporting and receiving support from clinicians, researchers, and academics, sharing our vision, mission, and values, as well as joining forces with like-minded medical associations. That's why we invite you to be part of our family and help us with your support to our technological structure and interpreters. At DFW, we are convinced that only dreaming big, working tirelessly, staying focused, and working surrounded by valuable people like yourselves, we will achieve and exceed our goals. Thank you, thank you, thank you. DFW is a non-profit organization where everyone's received no payment at all. During 5 years, our structure has been supported from grants of its board of directors only. Today, we kindly ask for your support, making sure that your microphones are switched off during all the sessions. In order to not to exceed 2 hours, there will be no live questions for our keynote speaker today, Janine Galizia, but you can interact with her throughout the chat box. To our speaker, we kindly remind you to keep track of your time with a maximum total of 45 minutes and a following 30 to 45 minutes round of questions and answers. We also remind you to speak as low as possible to allow our interpreters to do their job properly. Now, let me introduce the message from our president, Dr. Susan Raj from India, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us today. Let me share her message. It is such a pleasure to be here once again with our eminent panelists. Let me share a message to all those who are listening to us, is that we are all working with a definition which will reach us to our desired destination. That health is an indicator of our behavior with our environmental and restoration of self-healing systems of ourselves. There are three words: behavior, environment, and self-healing system. Our behavior with our environment will be seen in our health. Therefore, I call it as an indicator. Today, we have an eminent speaker with us to show the path which she has paved to reach to our destination. Our destination is the restoration of our self-healing system of ourselves, integrating various paths to reach to the destination is the role played by the Doctors Federation for the World, in short, DFW. Integration will also be extended towards the human behavior and the environment, which stand for soil, space, air, fire, and water. At the social structure, we understand that all these three functions of our cells, that are electrical, mechanical, and chemical functions, are directly connected with one and only profession called farming, where food is produced. To maintain self-healing system of every cell cycle, to the soil, to our stomach, we must be maintained. The economic system of entire humanity must be farming centered, where food, fuel, and fertilizer are the products which are permanently in demand. Therefore, DFW invite experts from various fields to show us their paths to be integrated to achieve the sustainable health and economic systems by modifying the habits and habitats of humans. Let me now introduce today to our very special guest, Janine Galizia from Australia. Let me find her resume, as I cannot read quite properly her resume. Uh, Now I can read it. So reevaluating Parkinson's disease, the triggers, the mechanism, and a safe and effective therapy. Janine Galicia is an independent researcher working on the mechanism that triggers and drives not only Parkinson but also Alzheimer's and autism disease, which is now the world's second fastest developing neurodegenerative disease. There is a direct connection between COPA and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Understanding how copper triggers the formation of fibrils, Lewy bodies, and motor issues is not just essential to understand the disease, but it shines a light on a clinically proven therapy which is safe, effective, and available to everyone. Janine is a researcher and author of her book Get Well Fast, and also a brilliant artist, where you can find her work in www.getwellfastnow.com. Janine Galizia @gmail.com. So let me now introduce to Janine Galizia. Janine Galizia, I'm so proud and happy to have you with us today. The microphone is yours. Hope you can share your screen. So
all right.
Thank you for accepting the invitation to be today with us.
With pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. Okay. I'll try to speak slowly.
Yeah.
Here is some slides. What I want to do is to give you a brief outline of what I found, okay? So I'm a researcher or an investigator, whichever we'd prefer, for 15 years on neurodegenerative diseases. My mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and my father was diagnosed 7 years later, almost, with Alzheimer's. So this is a disease that I know personally from an experience level, and then obviously the research after. So Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and autism are very, very similar. They actually overlap in very many ways. And when they overlap, we can actually have a look in the brain to see which brain regions overlap and the symptoms that correspond. So the cause of Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and autism is a bound copper deficiency, which stimulates, which also has at the same time a simultaneous isolated copper toxicity. That's going to sound confusing because there's a copper deficiency and a copper toxicity at exactly the same time. And this is something which is very confusing in the science. This is what I want to go through. But this is where the copper enzyme pathways and the copper cell signaling pathways are basically what's causing the dysfunction in the brains of people with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and autism. So copper dysregulation, because that's what we have, copper toxicity and copper deficiency at the same time, creates a deregulation and an imbalance of the copper and zinc ratio. This basically causes havoc not only for copper enzymes and cell signaling pathways, but also for the zinc pathways as well. Now, what we have here is the brain consequences, which is seen in the brain of people with Alzheimer's specifically. Okay, so there is a very high level of iron. This is something which has been known for a long time and also quite misunderstood. There's a very high level of iron in the brain. I'll go back to this because it's directly linked, as are all these symptoms, to copper deficiency. So there's an iron overload, there's fibril formation, protein plaque buildup. In Parkinson's, this is the Lewy bodies. In Alzheimer's, it's the amyloid plaque. There's ROS production, inflammation, tissue damage, and lesions. Protein misfolding. This is the prions that we see in these diseases. Low brain glutathione levels, because copper is a precursor for glutathione. Breakdown of myelin, breakdown of the dopamine synthesis pathway. There's a brain microbiome dysfunction because copper is one of the body's most important antimicrobials. And then we actually get to something which is kidney damage, which we see through a lowered EGFR. There's also DNA mutations. So what is bound copper? Bound copper is actually what we get through our food. Bound copper is actually what we have in our food, and it is what our bodies require. Copper is absorbed through the small intestine, and it is carried using proteins, which are copper transporters. This form of copper is safe. It can be uptake and it can be eliminated, and it's very stable. There's another form of copper. This other form of copper is not stable and it is highly inflammatory. So bound copper is what our bodies need to create all of the functions, including collagen synthesis, elastin synthesis, myelin for the brain, melanin for the color of your hair. It's endless. Copper is actually probably what we could consider to be the maestro of the symphony of the body. When we look at the enzymes and the cell signaling pathways that copper controls or regulates, we understand that they are all vital. None of these are secondary, from ATP production to DNA expression and structure, iron transport to make hemoglobin, obviously for the mitochondria to make energy. None of them are secondary. So what is this other form of copper? This is isolated copper, and this is really important. Isolated copper is not bound copper. So it's not able to go through the body's normal transport system for copper. So it's unable to be eliminated correctly, which is why it accumulates. And because it's toxic and it's inflammatory, it causes a lot of tissue damage. This is actually part of the problem because this toxic form of copper is abundant today in society in different ways. We'll talk about that after. Okay, for some reason it doesn't want to change. Let's have a look. Some reason it doesn't, oh, there we go. It wouldn't change screen. Okay, so copper deregulation is the cause of Alzheimer's with kidney insufficiency. There's no way around this. When we look at a process, I like to think of it as dominoes that are standing. And when we get to the point where we find that there's no more dominoes, those dominoes which basically fall and push the next one and create a whole series of dysfunctions and symptoms, when you can't backtrack any further, then this is when you need to put this to the test. Copper is basically the last stop. There is nothing before copper deficiency. Copper deficiency is basically the trigger of all of the cascade in cell signaling and enzyme pathways that we see, and they are lethal. So this is part of the problem. There is small symptoms that occur, memory loss, confusion. All of these are mild symptoms, but then we get to the more severe symptoms, which end up with kidney insufficiency, heart failure, and this is what happens with Alzheimer's. People don't die of memory loss. They die of the copper deficiency symptom as it's basically escalated. So what's interesting is that the areas of the brain that require the highest levels of copper are the exact same brain regions that dysfunction in the Alzheimer's brain. And interestingly enough, this dysfunction can be caused by repleting, so bringing back the bound form of copper into the person's diet in a substantial way to actually flood the body and the brain with the right form of copper. And this I can talk about later on. So, in a very interesting study that was done, widespread decreases of cerebral copper are common to Parkinson's disease, dementia, and Alzheimer's. It's also common to autism. All right. So the brain regions affected in Parkinson's disease, dementia, they basically studied 9 different areas of the brain and checked the levels of different metals. What was interesting is that 7 of those 9 detected for a severe copper deficiency. So 7 of the 9 brain regions that were affected in Parkinson's brain were the most affected by copper deficiency. There were other deficiencies, manganese, potassium, selenium, magnesium, and zinc. But 7 of the 9 were basically caused by or had a very high copper deficiency. This is actually what is seen also in Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease, out of those 7 brain regions where they found were common in Parkinson's disease patients, 4 of those same brain regions actually are copper deficient in Alzheimer's. So this is where they saw that the overlap, and it's the same in autism, the overlap in symptoms, because each brain region does generate different symptoms, whether it be confusion, whether it be brain loss, whether it be short-term memory. And these main regions of the brain that are affected in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and autism are the areas of the brain that need the most amount of copper. Some of them overlap, and that's why some of these diseases have separate symptoms, because some of these, oh, there's a problem on this one, doesn't matter, we'll just keep going through it. The alterations in levels of several metals across multiple regions of the Parkinson's brain is the commonest being widespread decreases in copper, but they're severe decreases in copper. And some of these different areas are basically why we see different symptoms. So the similarities, the brain regions affected by Alzheimer's and Parkinson's require the highest amount of copper. Okay, and so we see that some of these areas that do differ, 2 or 3 regions, are actually where we're seeing different symptoms, that being one of them in Parkinson's, which is where the motor issues, the involuntary movement of Parkinson's is actually coming into play. So copper deficiency actually equals Alzheimer's symptoms. This is something which is very, very obvious in the literature. Regions of copper deficiency match Alzheimer's symptoms. Decreases in copper levels were observed in several brain regions, which we previously found to be affected by Alzheimer's disease. So what causes all of this? Because there is the bound copper deficiency and the toxic form of copper toxicity. And it's really important to understand, because just going out to buy supplements is not going to be the solution. It's a very careful way of working to actually get the brain back to its restorative manner, but it's possible. So what causes this deficiency and toxicity? There are multiple triggers, and they are reversible. And here they are. 7 key triggers which I have found which cause the copper deficiency. We have a high sugar intake, COVID-19 vaccines. This is a very important one and should alert people into why the incidences of neurodegenerative diseases is escalating post COVID-19 and post COVID-19 vaccine. Okay, this is a very important one. So a lot of agricultural chemicals are actually chelators, and so they are stripping metals, not just copper, but copper from the soil, making them unavailable in our food. Understanding that 50% of our food today is copper deficient. Fluoridated water is another one. Copper, which is leaking from copper pipes, copper plumbing pipes. High zinc supplementation is very important post-COVID, and severe stress. All right, so I'll go through this very quickly because I do think that the questions will be more important. So sugar-induced copper deficiency. This is really, really important to understand because when you want to restore brain function, cognitive function, and memory loss in somebody, in a patient, diet is so important. So this aspect of sugar really needs to be understood. So it's sucrose, so sugar, or high fructose corn syrup. It doesn't mean fruit. Okay, this is a big confusion. Fructose is in fruit, but because the sugar in fruit is bound to the fiber, it's actually it's a protective mechanism. So fruit is excluded from being a cause of copper, and at the same time, it's absolutely essential because vitamin C is actually a carrier of copper. It actually helps transport copper, and a lot of our high vitamin C foods are fruit. So we're talking about fruit with the flesh. We're not talking about fruit juices. So sugar in these other forms reduces copper absorption in the intestine. It increases the excretion of copper. It actually can cause a copper dump, meaning there's a big inflammation caused by sugar. And so the copper goes out as an antioxidant and basically is there like a firefighter to put the fire out. But in the meantime, you've just lost your copper stores. So sugar is very violent when it comes to decreasing copper levels. It decreases copper transport expression. It impairs iron metabolism. So that's where we see there's less SOD enzyme, reduced neurotransmitter for dopamine, but also for myelin and mitochondrial dysfunction. Excuse me. This is a little bit more complicated. Also very important. This is where COVID-19 actually plays a part in the very severe copper deficiency which we're seeing at the moment. There is another theory about COVID. I won't go into it, but this is where the alpha 4 beta 7 integrin is actually the main receptor for COVID, and the rest of the cascade of biological processes which occur actually match alpha 4 beta 7 integrin as the main receptor. And it induces, through the reduction of CD4 cells, it reduces copper levels because copper is required for the maturation of the CD4 cells in the thymus. So as the spike protein of COVID-19 is in the system, it lowers the CD4 count. So the body tries to make more CD4, and it's basically constantly stealing copper levels to create these CD4 cells, draining the stocks. So I'll go quite quickly through these. This was just a summation which I just gave you. That's the actual pathway, going through the MADCAP1 into the Paya patches on the endothelium cells, entering the lymph system, and that's how COVID basically, or SARS-CoV-2, infiltrates the body, and this is why we see the intestinal breakdown in COVID patients. Okay, so going back to copper. Chelating copper has been going on for so long. Just after the First World War, there was a product which was used, which was NPK, and it was a chelator already. It was chelating copper from the soil. But since we have glyphosate, we have paraquat, we have EDTA, we have phosphates, we have organophosphates, these all chelate copper, meaning that copper is no longer available in our soils to the extent that it should be, as is zinc, iron, magnesium. Okay, so this is actually really important. This is something that we should understand, because glyphosate has been looked at for many years for its toxicity. Glyphosate is not particularly toxic. However, it is a formidable chelator, and that's how it's making people sick. So glyphosate's chelating effects. Glyphosate acts as chelating agent, capable of chelating metals. The synergistic effects of metals and agrochemicals may pose an environmental problem, as they have been shown to induce neurological abnormalities and behavioral changes in aquatic species. The last thing that I knew, the human body was aquatic, where 70, 80, 90% water. This is exactly what's going on in the human body. Okay, so it's not just fish and in rivers. This is part of the problem. It's the focus on these agrochemicals as toxic, where it's actually their chelating capacity, which is problematic. Further research should be elucidate the role of glyphosate as a chelator, and particularly as non-specific property potential affecting many organisms and processes. In the process of re-evaluation of glyphosate, its chelating activity has barely been discussed. And this is a major problem, because it is a major problem in our system, in our aquatic system. But then there's fluoride. Fluoride alters the gut lining, and it reduces the availability of copper absorption. Fluoride in water also affects dopamine production. It also, which is a big factor for Parkinson's disease. Fluoride also breaks down and reduces myelin synthesis, which is obviously the myelin sheath, which is breaking down, which what we see is breaking down in MS, in Parkinson's disease, in Alzheimer's disease, and in autism. And what's interesting is that the pathways that we see, mTOR and MAPK, copper dependent. Cytochrome C oxidase, the superoxide dismutase, ceruloplasm, all of these mechanisms that we see are dysfunctional. They're all copper dependent. Okay, so it's pretty much a story of all roads leading to Rome, and all those roads leading to copper. This is another one which is really important. Copper pipes. This is actually known all around the world by the governments. The copper plumbing has been degrading for years, and copper plumbing should be changed almost every 10 years, and then they're not changed. So what we have now is we have water chlorination, so chlorine, and fluorine, so fluoride, in our water systems, but they're very acidic. And because they're acidic, they actually damage the inside lining of the copper pipes, and copper ions are basically leaching into the water. So when you drink, when you're cooking with this water, when you're bathing in this water, you're basically taking in the isolated toxic form of copper. Okay. Some people say you can get copper from drinking water. This is true, but it's the wrong form of copper. So this is where a lot of the speech is actually conflicting, and by not understanding which copper we're needing and which copper we're getting, we can actually create a problem or not be able to help someone recover from a neurological problem related to copper deficiency. The US Environmental Protection Agency allows copper up to 1.3 parts per million in human drinking water, 10 times more than the amount proved to be toxic to animals. And this is happening everywhere. The level of copper is so high in water today, some people may see that turquoise lining in the bottom of their sink, in their bath, a rim around the shower. This is the toxic form of copper which is building up, but people are drinking it. There are fluoridated free bottles of water or filters that can actually help remove the copper from the drinking water. Interestingly enough, the countries with the highest incidence of Alzheimer's disease, all 100%, I spent days doing this study, 100% of the countries with the highest incidences of Alzheimer's, 100% all use copper plumbing in residential buildings. And interesting, I also looked at the countries which had the lowest incidence of Alzheimer's, and they all use PVC pipes. Zinc and copper. Zinc and copper are in a lot of supplements today. Most of the time they are isolated salts. Zinc and copper compete for absorption in the small intestine. And when zinc is taken in high doses or over long periods, it actually reduces copper absorption and actually generates a copper deficiency. This happens because excess zinc stimulates the production of I can't pronounce this word, I never could, a particular protein that binds metals and has a stronger affinity for copper than for zinc. So we're basically depleting our copper stores, even if we're taking a supplement that has both. Supplements are actually a big part of this problem. Stress. Stress creates the same copper dump that sugar does. This is one that is particularly close to home because this is, in my opinion, what a burnout is. I went through burnout, I went into cardiac reanimation, and this is basically how I got my severe copper deficiency. So this is very much an experience of understanding what the symptoms are when you go down on a severe copper deficiency. I had, I think, all of them, but then I had to learn how to get back up. So I'll talk about that in a minute. That severe stress provokes a copper dump, which results in sudden loss of copper. This is really important, and this happens with COVID-19 vaccination. A lot of people went into a copper dump just hours after. Sudden death is caused by copper dump. Neurological symptoms, shaking symptoms, the symptoms we saw post COVID-19 vaccination are all severe copper deficiency. But so is a burnout, regardless of COVID-19, a general burnout. It's hard to get back up, but it's absolutely doable. And diet has a big part of this. Copper dump creates liver damage. Okay, this is why the protocol that I'll talk about in a minute that I'm actually using for my father to restore his cognitive capacity and memory loss after 9 years of being diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It creates, copper dump creates liver damage. Because low levels of copper reduce the production of the copper transporter ceruloplasmin, leaving the dumped, isolated, toxic form of copper, creating basically inflammation and tissue damage in the liver. So this is actually a form of copper-induced liver damage, which needs to be addressed if you're looking to help someone who basically has this form of damage. The flood of unbound free toxic form of copper generates oxidative stress. It leads to inflammation, fibrosis, liver damage, dysfunction, but it can actually lead to liver dysfunction and death. Corrective protocol. Alzheimer's symptoms can be reversed. Parkinson's symptoms can be reversed. Autism symptoms can be reversed. And there's something very interesting that is at play. They all function on a therapeutic method that is the same. So these diseases can be corrected with a copper kidney diet. I would suggest a supplement because it's very hard to get the correct amount of copper today just through diet. The kidneys and copper need to be working together to eliminate isolated copper whilst bringing in the right form of bound copper to accelerate kidney tissue repair. This is vital. Kidneys and lymph in Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. In Parkinson's disease, free liver is related to increased oxidative stress, alpha-synuclein oligomerization, and Lewy body formation. Decreased copper along with increased iron has been found in the substantia nigra and various other areas of the brain. Copper influences iron content in the brain, causing it to go up through ferrioxidase ceruloplasm activity. Therefore, decreased protein-bound copper in brain may enhance iron accumulation and cause basically the oxidative stress. This is seen non-stop. Lymphatic drainage is essential because it's the lymphatic system that needs to clear the tissue damage, the inflammatory debris, and basically clear out the system. Okay, so the lymphatic dysfunction is defined as failure to basically drain that interstitial fluid, which is what we're going to need to repair the system for somebody. The kidneys regulate the fluid management system of the body. So it's important to work on the lymphatic system to clear the waste, to drain the inflammation, to drain all of the debris, the proteins, the waste out of the system by first approaching the kidneys, not targeting the lymphatic system first. We must target the kidneys first, rehydrate the lymph so that the lymph is able to drain and the kidneys are able to handle the waste as they come out. Kidney insufficiency is a hallmark of all neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's disease. But the kidney insufficiency always occurs before the neurodegeneration is visible. This is a big part, and I'm happy to answer questions on this. The kidney-brain link. It has long been believed that kidney function is linked to brain activity. Clinical studies demonstrate that patients with chronic kidney disease are more prone to cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease, and the degree of cognitive impairment is closely related to chronic kidney disease progression and renal failure. Still quoting this, moreover, the fact that cognitive function in chronic kidney disease patients is significantly improved after successful kidney transplantation. When you improve the kidney function, you gain cognitive capacity. And this reveals a linkage between chronic kidney disease and Alzheimer's disease. However, the mechanisms behind this are unclear. It's the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is what is clearing the waste away. And we see this in different papers which state in Alzheimer's, there are accumulations of big protein chunks in the brain. We think they may be accumulating in the brain because they're not being efficiently removed by these vessels. Which vessels? The lymphatic system. They're accumulating in the interstitial fluid where they're remaining inflammatory, they're creating inflammation, and this is the inflammation we're seeing in these diseases. Another paper said clues in brain's waste system may help explain Alzheimer's. The waste system is not working. The lymphatic system is not working. Why? Because the lymph is becoming thick and stagnant because the kidney function, which is managing the fluid, is unable to work correctly because of the chronic kidney dysfunction. Alzheimer's disease, basically meningeal brain lymphatics point to new clues in pathogenesis. It's everywhere. The kidney connection is everywhere. Here we see again, analysis revealed a significant association between decreased EGFR, that is where you will see it, and increased Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and autism. And here they say particularly in patients with less than 30 mil EGFR, honestly, people become symptomatic under 70. People with an EGFR under 70, and this is from experience, have brain fog. This is called brain fog. Above 70, it doesn't really occur so much, but it's when the person goes under 70, the brain fog starts. As the EGFR goes down, you will notice closer to 60 is when people start to get diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It's always the same. It's pretty much the marker that you could count on. And it's reversible. The authors conclude renal insufficiency is significantly associated with an increase of Parkinson's disease. Developmental deficits have long been recognized as a major complication of pediatric kidney disease. This is for children. This is actually the link, one of the links for autism. The US chronic kidney disease in children, cross-sectional cohort study of children with mild to moderate pediatric chronic kidney disease identified more than double the normative expectation of neurodegenerative impairments. So the more there is kidney insufficiency in children, the higher the neurodegenerative symptoms are. Every time. This should be understood by everybody. But it's not on people's radar for a very good reason. In 2017, the International Society of Nephrology basically stated that it is estimated that 1 in 10 people worldwide already have chronic kidney disease. The problem with this is that is 2017. COVID-19 vaccines damage the kidneys. They induce kidney insufficiency, severe kidney insufficiency. So post 2020, we would have seen a major increase in the worldwide population of people with kidney insufficiency. This is now, I would say, probably 1 in 3 people that have got an EGFR of close to 80, let's say, a little bit over or a little bit under, and close to 80 is getting very close to symptoms that are building up for heart disease, for cognitive decline, for all sorts of problems. And there's a problem. Nephrologists are primarily responsible for end-stage kidney disease care. 92% of the countries surveyed showed that there was basically worldwide, the median number of nephrologists is 9.9 per million people. 9.9 nephrologists per 1 million people in the population. So nephrology basically is just looking at end-stage kidney disease, and there is almost nobody left to understand just this significant decline that we're facing. And I think that's the end of the screens that I had. We can go to questions, or I can continue. But what is really interesting with Alzheimer's is that you have these 3 factors every time. You have the bound copper deficiency every time. You have a copper toxicity, which is more complicated to diagnose, and every single time there will also be chronic kidney disease. it could be in between 65 and 70, but it's not going to be, you won't find people with Alzheimer's disease higher than 70. They'll already be probably closer to 60. So my father has Alzheimer's. My mother died of Alzheimer's. People who die of Alzheimer's do not die of memory loss. They don't die of Alzheimer's. They die of kidney insufficiency, or they die from a copper deficiency symptom, which can lead to a stroke, can lead to heart failure. This is the main reason why people die of Alzheimer's disease. It's not because of Alzheimer's, it's the kidney or the copper, which basically are unfortunately, the trigger. You can treat people that have these. So to give you an example, I've been helping my father, who was diagnosed in 2016 with Alzheimer's disease. I'll see if I can bring up, here we go. This is actually a part of the report from my father when I took my father in 2024 to see the professor who actually diagnosed him in 2016 with Alzheimer's. And the professor stated, my father's memory began declining around 2021, which was basically confirmed by a scan. And my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia for several years. This was where it was getting interesting, because my father's health went down very far. And then I started working on the copper, working on the kidneys, and we brought him back almost to the same state that he was 4 years prior. So I went back 4 years later and I got a test done. My father was then at a score, MMSE, it's an Alzheimer's score. My father then was at a score of 18, which the professor stated, which compares quite favorably to the score of 24 years ago, knowing that normally in Alzheimer's, a person, their state goes down usually 3 points every year. So in that 4-year period, my father should have lost 12 points. The professor didn't know that my father had gone down very far and we were bringing him back up. And he did state, this is very slow progression. Just two points in a 4-year period is most unusual with this diagnosis. And it is, because it wasn't the natural progression of the disease. The disease was basically being slowed down and corrected by a copper supplement and a drink, quite simply, to work on the kidneys, and cycling these two so that the kidneys would start to work properly. My father gained 10 points already in his kidney function. So his kidneys are working better, he's draining more, and the good copper is basically being included into his diet, into his protocol. And he has virtually no short-term or long-term memory loss. He has foresight, hindsight, initiative. You can have a conversation with him on any subject. This is just a few weeks down the track because there was an interruption in the protocol. You can talk to him about virtually anything. There are moments where he slips back. These moments when he slips back are 100% every time when he's stressed. So I believe that as we've started again, and we're accelerating the protocol, that should basically be eliminated. How long would this need to continue? That's a different question, and it would also take looking to see how the kidneys are working, looking probably to see how the brain is being cleared of the masses that are there, the protein buildup which is there. But at the same time, there is the fact that my father was given 5 COVID-19 vaccines. So how long is that spike protein circulating? I don't know. and that spike protein circulating is constantly creating and inducing a copper deficiency. So that's actually something that has to be taken into account. So maybe we can go to questions. I don't know if anybody has any. Um,
Yes, I have a lot. I
okay,
have a lot, Janine. But hearing you and seeing the evidence that you're showing to us, it looks like it would be quite related to what we understand as insulin resistance and diabetes mellitus type 2, because some researchers have referred Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes because they show high levels of, a lot of, let's say, beta amyloid plaques, as well as some other features in their brains that are triggered by advanced glycation end products.
correct.
That is glucose attached to the brain, to the cells of the brain. So, what would be your feedback or your insights regarding this idea that are very related to high intake, as you mentioned, of not only fructose but also glucose in the bloodstream?
Yeah, copper actually plays a very big part on insulin regulation, on the way sugar is used in the brain, and that sugar is inflammatory. The more inflammation that there is, the more copper is being used to put the fire out, and therefore no longer available where it needs to be. So a high sugar diet will create that copper deficiency until it basically will drain the stock. One thing which is really interesting, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but sugar, people that are on high sugar diets get white hair very fast. White hair basically is a good sign of copper deficiency because copper is the precursor of melanin. And what's actually interesting, and I saw a paper on this many years ago, where they correlated white hair with Alzheimer's disease. White hair actually occurs on Alzheimer's heads in different regions that correspond to the regions which are copper deficient in Alzheimer's disease, which is really interesting. Some people have a white patch behind where the cerebellum is, or it could be at the top, or it could be on the sides. But copper controls a lot of the insulin pathways, regulates them. So there's a big connection between sugar and copper, and copper and sugar actually. Copper and vitamin C use the same cell receptor, and vitamin C is essential to as part of the transport system for copper. So when there's a flood of sugar in the system, vitamin C is basically pushed out from its receptor, leaving copper unable to be transported correctly. So the higher the diet and the regularity that people are eating sugar will basically make sure that they reduce their copper intake.
And surprisingly, not only copper but vitamin C are vital to the synthesis of collagen.
Yes,
So if we lack the synthesis of 28 different types of collagens, then we are going to have a very sudden and very quick aging process.
correct.
And it can be seen everywhere in our skin, in our vessels, and also in our bones. So we're
Yeah.
going to have osteopenia and osteoporosis just because we are lacking of copper. That is, it's a cofactor needed to use vitamin C as a coenzyme to do their job everywhere in 28 different kind of collagens.
Yeah, yeah. And elastin as well. So it gives the elasticity of the bones and the blood vessels. And when that copper is low, this is where aneurysms come from. The vessels thin and they create balloons as the blood flows through, which end up popping sometimes. But aneurysms are directly related to a copper deficiency because of that breakdown in collagen and elastin. Yeah.
But it's quite amazing what you have referred regarding the decrease in the synthesis of myelin,
Yeah.
because these kind of, let's say, neurological degenerative issues are quite often everywhere, and the people, especially all those who have diabetes and have neuropathies, lack this capacity of sensing peripheral stimulus, and they simply says, well, I do not feel anything, and that would be caused by the lack of copper, and also from myelin.
Mm. Yeah. It's copper is really the maestro of the symphony of the body. I think there's something between 30 to 50 enzymes. Not all of the enzymes are the ones listed, where copper is actually the cofactor. But the copper cell signaling pathways as well, signal transduction. Copper is so important. They are vital processes. So although there's less than, let's say, magnesium and iron, the processes which copper is used for are absolutely fundamental. And what's interesting is it was known in the 1930s that there was very low levels of copper left in the soil. This was actually studies which were done in England in nutritional science. And they realized that after World War One, basically what was happening is that NPK was being used on the soil. So it was bringing nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus back into the soil, but not the other minerals. We know today that you need microbes in the soil and you need minerals in the soil to basically regenerate the soil, to turn basically dirt to soil. And that wasn't happening. But these agricultural chemicals, they don't just chelate copper and other metals, what's actually in the soil today. They actually dump the toxic form of copper also in the soil. So our food is actually becoming a source of toxic copper because the copper that they're using is like an antimicrobial. So it's there to kill the pests on the crops. So they're putting isolated copper salts on the crops to kill the microbes because the immune system of the plant, which is controlled by copper, and now the plant is copper deficient, is so weak that the plant can no longer defend for itself. So we're now getting copper deficient crops, which are copper toxic. So it's actually a big deal, but it was known back in the 1930s. And since then, agricultural chemicals have almost always been chelators. So not necessarily toxic, but dramatic chelators that are stripping zinc, magnesium, and the other metals, manganese, copper from the soil. And that's a big part of today's food chain, which has broken down. Probably the main reason why we're now less than 1 person in 10, not just with chronic kidney disease, but it's also estimated that 1 person in 10 is copper deficient. And what's interesting with a copper deficiency is that it leads to kidney damage. And I'll say this, years ago now in Mexico and in other countries, there was a disease called chronic kidney disease of unknown origin. And they saw that basically what was happening with the heavy metals from the agricultural chemicals were going through the system, and arriving at the kidneys, but they would damage the kidneys because this is the toxic form of metals, including arsenic, cadmium, but copper as well. And toxic form of copper damages the kidneys to the point where the kidneys can no longer eliminate them. So it's a double whammy. The copper deficiency um, means that the copper is not there to fight the copper toxicity and to restore the kidney tissue. So it's actually it's the first point. The copper deficiency is where we need to start. It's actually quite easy to avoid copper toxicity. If you're living in a fluoridated country, you can find filters or you can drink non-fluoridated water. Um, Eating organic is obviously something we all know. Growing your own food is something we all know. Um, Eating less sugar is definite. Eating a copper-rich diet of organic food is an essential. And then I would say to most people to add a copper supplement into their diet and not to go long-term copper supplement because you must balance copper and zinc. But as most people have high zinc and low copper, you're better bringing in copper to begin with without a zinc supplement so that you can balance them and you can do a hair analysis to check your levels. But the best way to understand if your levels are okay is through symptoms because they're so obvious. Copper deficiency symptoms will go away straight away when there's the right amount of copper.
Amazing what you said regarding the white hair,
Yeah, yeah.
because it is quite often whenever you get into very high stress level, whatever the activity is, then your hair is going to grow white.
Yeah. And why? What's the precursor of melanin? It's copper. And what happens when we are in a very stressful, acute stressful situation? A copper dump. So when there's stress, what happens is that the body will direct copper for what is the most essential activity at the time. Don't forget that every single mitochondria needs copper to create ATP
Yeah.
because copper is essential for the ion transport, but also for the Krebs cycle, cytochrome deoxidase. So what's really important to understand is that the stress that we have, it could be a chronic stress or it could be an acute stress, redirects our copper stores. And then we're copper deficient on all of the lesser important um, functions. So your hair will go white faster, then the brain will disappear. The skin will get wrinklier because copper will keep the immune system working. So when we get to the point where the hair's gone white, the wrinkles are there, the immune system's gone down, then you know that you're getting into the territory where the major functions can no longer be maintained because the copper levels are so far down. But what is really fascinating is that when you bring copper back, I can't tell you why. I can tell you this is exactly what I went through and everyone that I know of that went through. One of the first signs that you see is the skin. It seems odd because we think the skin is probably like wrinkles disappearing, um, not essential. But one of the first things that you will see is your hair will change and your skin will change. And is it because the skin is the biggest elimination organ of the body? Is that why? I don't know. But it's just really interesting because immune cells, white blood cells, depend on copper to be at their maximum or their optimal levels. So a lot of people today are immune suppressed. Within 12 hours, you could correct somebody's immune white blood cell count, putting them on a copper, correct form of copper supplementation. Something like myocarditis is actually regulated by CD4 cells. CD4 cells are copper dependent. Copper goes down, CD4 numbers drop, myocarditis, the inflammation around the myocard, the pericard, um, is that's where that's coming from. Another one which we're seeing a lot today is mast cell activation symptom. Mast cell activation system where you symptom where you've got the histamine levels which go up. Who regulates histamine? Copper. So it's really interesting because COVID-19 has created post-infection or vaccination copper deficiency symptoms that have gone absolutely through the roof today, which are smaller, the clotting, the accelerated aging, the sudden death, the blood clotting, I think I just said that, the myocarditis, the immune suppression. These are all copper driven. People who are taking copper post COVID-19 are eliminating all of these. But even if it wasn't because of COVID-19, these symptoms are actually symptoms. They're not actually an end story symptom. And I also know this because when my mother had Alzheimer's, she was actually not speaking at all. She had just gibberish. There were no words. There was no recognition until one day she sat up in the hospital and she began speaking fluently to everybody in the room, recognized the people she knew, didn't obviously recognize the people, the nurses and the doctors who she didn't know, but her memory function was completely intact. The memory's not lost. It's the communication which is interrupted. Part of it is the myelin sheath, which is degraded. But once you restore the copper levels, the restoration is extremely fast. And because the brain and the liver and the mitochondria are the three main organs of the body that require the most amount of copper, when copper is needed, these three will actually improve function directly because they're so essential. The mitochondria will pick up the energy levels. The energy levels will actually help the tissue repair. The tissue repair will actually help the system to work better. The myelin sheath will come back. The dopamine will come back. It can be restored, but you must be very careful of the form of copper that you take, because most copper in supplements are isolated copper salts, which can come into the system. They're very absorbable, they're very easily absorbed, but they're not easily eliminated. So if people are taking copper supplements and they're isolated salts on a daily basis, they're going to accumulate them at some point, and they're going to end up suffering from copper toxicity. Or, as we've seen, people that have been taking high dose zinc post-COVID have created in themselves severe copper deficiencies. So they're possible, and diet that needs to work with the kidneys. It's all possible to do, but it just needs to be done with the understanding of cycling the kidneys first to rehydrate the lymph so that the lymph is able to pull out the waste. And that's the natural healing part of the body. But we have to get the kidneys to get that fluid management system working correctly. At the same time, using the copper to bring up the energy levels, to bring up the ATP production, but to start restoring tissue. And as we can see the kidney function going up, then you move higher, you move on a higher dose of copper. And then you see the symptoms just disappearing. And it's really quick. It's actually astoundingly quick.
Here we have a question from Selene Santos. Cooked food and vegetables are less copper affected?
Cooked. I think it depends on which ones. But I know from me, because I put myself on a copper deficiency protocol, which I created because I wasn't able to be helped by doctors. The doctors didn't understand the symptoms that I had, and I was lucky enough to figure it out. So I realized that I had a copper deficiency. It was so dramatic that the person who did my hair analysis said, "I don't know how you're still alive," which I almost wasn't because I was in cardiac reanimation. This is in 2016. And I went on a raw fruit and vegetable diet, organic, and nothing that was cooked. Um, what I noticed, so this is now from my own opinion, um, going on raw fruit was the thing that works the fastest with the copper. Um, Bringing in cooked food got no effect at all, almost stagnant. Bringing in meat, dairy, which meat has copper, so does dairy if they're organic, um, saw me continuing to get worse. So I realized that cooked food was either no progress or worse progress. And it was on the raw fruit and vegetables that were very high in vitamin C and in copper. So this includes the nuts as well. And I used a copper supplement because I was even taking beef liver, organic liver, and it was not enough. Absolutely not enough. Um, and the raw fruit and vegetables, but particularly the red fruits. So watermelon is the highest on the list. And that also brings the hydration back to the lymphatic system. The raw food brings the water that your body keeps. The water that you drink in drinks usually will actually end up urinating almost the same quantity. It doesn't stay in the system. Eating high water content food, you keep that water and it actually goes to rehydrating the lymph. And so it's just so much faster. But if it plays a difference on copper, I know that it didn't work for me, but I can't say that it's general for everybody.
Yeah, I made a quick search regarding copper, and it says copper is found naturally on many whole nutrient-dense foods, especially organ meats, shellfish, seeds, nuts, and legumes. A varied
Correct.
diet usually provides sufficient copper unless absorption is impaired or intake is chronically low due to processed food consumption or excessive zinc.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Or excessive sugar, or if the copper is just not in the food that we're buying.
Okay, and then I see a list of food that is related to copper content, and I see that only two, let's say, uh, food. That the first one is beef liver cooked, who has 12.4 milligrams,
Yeah.
and the second one is oysters cooked that have 4.8 milligrams. The rest of the list have less than 1 milligram. As for example, shiitake mushrooms has 0.9, and then sesame seeds 0.7, cashews 0.7, sunflower seeds less than 0.5. And then it comes the dark chocolate, the chickpeas, tofu, avocado, spinach, lentils, quinoa, and potatoes that are very, very low uh, related to copper content.
Yeah. Yeah. I understood that it was better to raise my vitamin C level, use copper in a higher dose coming from a water-soluble form of copper. That works. And at the same time, rehydrate the lymph. And that's what I do with my father. It's the same thing. So I can see the effect in myself. I've seen it in other people, but it works. The high liver, hard to eat. I'm unable to. The high, interestingly enough, the high copper foods are often the most treated in glyphosate. The grains, the whole grains, the nuts, often a lot of the foods which are actually treated the most in whether it be glyphosate or another herbicide or pesticide. So it's also the problem of people thinking when they go to the supermarket and they buy liver from the supermarket that liver must be high in copper, yet that liver probably isn't. Yet when you have an organic form of liver from an organic supplier, it will be higher. So we're definitely not comparing the same things. So it's very hard for the uneducated person who still shops at the supermarket to raise their copper levels, because most of the food just doesn't have enough copper in it. And it's been a very long time that it hasn't. So um, I think one of the best copper supplements out there is sodium copper chlorophyllin. It's the one that I used for myself. It's the one that I used for my dad. And I know many people now that do, because it's the one that I suggest that people do use. But chlorophyllin is good, but it still needs help. And interestingly, vitamin A is a very big help for copper. There are also some amino acids that are very important for copper. So I actually formulated a copper supplement to help my father, which actually has all of these ingredients in it, because my dad's in a nursing home and I couldn't manage his diet. So I couldn't give him the things that he needed, other than giving him a drink that I could sit with him and he drinks when I'm there. Um, I can't intervene with the food that he eats. So basically the copper source that my dad is getting is coming from a supplement. And I would say probably pretty much only from the supplement. So it is possible without using food. It's always better to use food. But I think honestly, when your copper levels are so low, that we're going through liver failure, we're going through Alzheimer's or heart failure, food's no longer going to be enough. The levels of copper that you need, considering that copper is needed for so many vital functions, um, is enormous. We know that chronic inflammation and fatigue occur with every single chronic disease. And so who controls chronic inflammation and fatigue? It's copper. When you put copper back in your diet, what are the two elements that disappear? Chronic inflammation, so pain, and fatigue leaves. So it's really interesting, but you have to go pretty hard. You have to be fairly brutal, and every day, every day, every day. Because as soon as someone goes up, they can just as quickly come down if you leave a couple of days without maintaining that copper store because they're so deficient.
Yes, I'm finding that copper oxide is purely absorbed, but it's very used in multivitamins
Yeah,
supplementation. So it wouldn't work as good as some others, organic such as gluconate or bisglycinate or even orotate. But I would these gluconate, bisglycinate, or orotate, copper orotate, would be more frequently in, let's say, it's vegetables and fruits?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because I understand these are supplementations only and not food itself,
Yes, yeah. So the one that I have in the supplement that I give my dad is the chlorophyllin.
chlorophyllene. That,
Yeah,
that you find in the literature and you got the formulation
yeah,
and asked
yeah.
for.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's a form of chlorophyllin where the actual copper, because chlorophyllin is obviously the chlorophyll. I mean, Raul, you know this much better than I do. But the form of copper which is replacing the magnesium in the copper chlorophyllin that I have is actually from the mulberry leaf, filtered and concentrated. So it's actually food grade copper. It's not a copper salt, which is replacing the magnesium. Um, and so it's water soluble and you eliminate it when you get too much. So you don't have to worry too much about the toxicity. And in the beginning, you have to go so hard that the toxicity is not going to be there. But it's the form that I've been using, or that I did use, and everyone that I know of using copper for COVID and for cancer as well. but neurodegenerative diseases works brilliantly. It's actually in the literature as well. So interesting to see the other forms that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Mm.
And another issue that most of people living with type 2 diabetes face is anemia. And
Yes.
they
Mm.
are also iron deficient.
Yes.
Uh, so this is, you know, the physicians get used to get uh, ferrous fumarate to address this topic, but we have a problem here because are they compatible, iron and copper among themselves? They are agonists or antagonists?
But iron needs copper. I don't know if we can call them antagonists. Iron and copper will have to work together
Okay,
because in the liver you have the protein ceruloplasm, which is actually the a copper transporter. If
also.
you like, it's a copper transporter which is used to transport the copper so that the iron transport because it will actually help iron transport. And when copper is low, this is actually known in veterinarian science since um, decades and decades, and even going back into the early medical history, anemia was always understood to be a copper deficiency. It's never low iron, it's just that iron's not able to be transported correctly because of the lack of copper, which creates the lack of ceruloplasm, so it's unable to transport the iron, and that's part of the copper-induced toxicity in the liver. Because when there is that copper dump, and there's low bound copper, there's low ceruloplasm, so that iron's not moving. So iron is actually dependent on copper to be regulated and to be transported. It's not an iron deficiency. Anemia is not an iron deficiency. It's just that iron is unable to be moved to where it needs to be. And it's always been understood in medical and scientific literature going decades back to be a copper deficiency. And in veterinarian science, still today, when an animal has anemia, they'll give them copper.
And then, moreover, we have also facing a very troublesome situation, at least in Mexico, regarding plum intoxication. Let's
Mm.
say lead, because you know that they also, well, heavy metals, uh, let's say cadmium and arsenic and some others, but specifically plum, or well, we call it plum in Mexico, but it's in fact is a lead. Uh, Inhibits, I think, the position or uh, the action site for iron and copper in the transfer change, I believe, as much as many other things that lead occasions. So, have you found something related to this?
But I know that heavy metals accumulate when bound copper is deficient. That's all of them. That's cadmium, that's arsenic, that's lead, that's all of them. Um, it's you've also got the inflammation that they create, the ROS that they create, the oxidation that they create. It's copper that has to go and deal with that. It's copper that has to go and restore the tissue. It's copper that has to go constantly to deal with all of these uh, toxic form of metals, and they're everywhere. We're being inundated with the heavy metals in the toxic form and chelating out of our food. The forms of metals that we do need, the metals that our health actually depends on. But it's not just lead and it's not just iron. Iron will step up as a cofactor for a zinc deficiency or for a copper deficiency, but it can't work correctly. So it's not a perfect match, and it's not ideal, and it can't be long term. But it's I think really a question of understanding the difference between the two different coppers, because when you go back and you read the scientific literature, there is a lot of scientific papers that will just clearly state copper causes cancer, and they don't actually specify if it's the bound form or isolated form. And then there are other papers that will say, is copper the new therapy, the new chemotherapy for cancer patients? And so there's this scientific debate at the moment. Is it a copper chelator that we need for our health, or is it a copper supplementation that we need? And interestingly enough, because copper is actually a big part of the development of cancer. And this goes back to Otto Warburg's work in the 1950s. And what was interesting with this is that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Absolutely just lost my train of thought on that one.
Well, you were talking about Otto Warburg and his research on, I think, cancer development by
Yeah,
Rose.
yeah. So I can't remember what I was going to say. But the importance of understanding, this is what I was saying, sorry, that in the literature, earlier on, they didn't specify which form of copper was hurting health, and if it was a deficiency or if it was a toxicity. But it is interesting to know that Big Pharma is actually creating already today copper chelators as a form of chemotherapy, as they are actually also creating copper as a therapy for cancer, because it's so obvious that the two of them are at play in cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and many diseases that we have. And it's a very difficult thing to do. So if we are to try to get control over our health, therefore be less dependent on medicine, there are many forms of copper out there in a natural form, in supplementation or in food that can work. But it's just so it's vital to maintain kidney function while you're putting that copper back in, because as copper comes in, those heavy metals will come through the kidneys. And as those heavy metals come through the kidneys, they're going to damage the kidneys. And the kidneys are already struggling. So you need to work with both of them. But it's interesting because medicine knows. They don't say anything. I haven't spoken to doctors recently that actually say we studied copper at medical school, but Big Pharma knows it. So
Hmm.
they just can't at the moment. They're still testing. So it's definitely the way to go, and it can definitely be a natural path rather than a medical path.
And so this brings us a hope that supplementing or having a better intake of copper from foods could benefit not only all those who are type 2 diabetes patients, but also all who have insulin resistance. I was reading here when you were speaking a little bit regarding the prevalence of insulin resistance worldwide, and I found some prices, surprising figures mentioning that it is very prevalent everywhere. For instance, in United States is almost 40% insulin resistance. In Saudi Arabia, only 19. In Brazil, 34%. In Venezuela, almost 50%. and Southeast Asia, 44%, especially in Malaysia. I wonder in Mexico, but I would believe that it's about 80%. That is subclinical. And maybe they are not ill at all. They do not have diabetes,
Yeah.
and they do not have insulin resistance. What they have is intoxication or copper deficiency.
Yeah, I've got another one here. Association between serum copper and glucose analysis. That was 2024. Diabetes or insulin resistance is a big part of copper deficiency. It's the literature is so abundant. It has been written about for so long. It's just not on anybody's radar. And I think also the fact that minerals and metals are sort of just seen as another vitamin or another nutrient, but they're the head of enzyme functions. They're as a cofactor. They're the head of entire cell signaling pathways. So the consequences of a deficiency is a cascade. It's not minor at all. And when you have something like a metal like copper, where it's almost only vital functions, the consequences are lethal. A consequences of a copper deficiency is lethal. It's not just a minor problem. It's a big deal, and it's just not addressed at all. So one thing which I find really interesting, and I know you'll really like this, is that the farming, the new agricultural system, they know that there is a big problem with copper in the soil, because one of the red flags was cannabis, the plantations of cannabis. Cannabis is a very copper dense plant, which is why I think cannabis has so much medical capacity. So when you want to grow cannabis, you must have copper-rich soil. And so when they were discovering in big crops that the cannabis wouldn't even grow, the plant was sick, but it wouldn't even grow, and they were testing the soil, they saw that the copper levels were so low. What they did is they would take pipes, copper pipes, and they would stick the copper pipe partially above the soil, partially below the soil, in each corner of a certain sized field. And basically, the copper in the soil would increase, because for the same reason as the copper pipes, the water going through the copper pipes, the copper ions leach into the water, into the soil, and the plants are able to convert that form of copper into the right form of copper, and the plantation copper levels was restored. And so this is such an amazing thing for people who want to create their own copper or their own gardens, their own vegetable gardens. You could just go and buy a copper pipe from the local hardware shop and just stick one either in the pot if it's a pot plant, or in the corners of the vegetable patch, and just watch the difference with the plantation. And I actually did that with my plants, and the produce was massive. We had the biggest year that we've ever had when it came to the produce of the food that we were growing in the vegetable patch. But agriculture knows that as well. So it's medicine knows it, science knows it, the agricultural system knows it, and the public doesn't.
Yeah, thanks so much, Janine. I would like to open the microphones to our physicians today that haven't have the opportunity to do direct questions to you. Silvia Aldrete from Argentina, if you want to address any question to Janine. Ross Monroy from Mexico. Loretta Ambrogini from, I believe, from Italy, Gloria Marilu Calderon from Mexico, and Dr. Augusto from United States, from Florida, I think. Would you like to do any questions to Janine? I think I saw Patricia Calisperi somewhere here, but I don't see her now. So the microphones are yours. Ah, yes, there she is. So, Dr. Augusto, any comment or questions to Janine? Okay, Patty, welcome. Welcome to the stage. The microphones are open if you want to send a message to Janine as we are adjourning our journey today. Patty? Well, yeah, sometimes microphones do not work. So it happens whenever we are lecturing classes. So they send their message by writing their questions. But I would like to ask you, as we are adjourning in, I think, 8 minutes, but I would like to ask you, Janine, how has been the development or the results of your book, Get Well Fast? Tell us about it briefly.
The book it took me 10 years to write. And the book is basically outlining where I saw all of the problems of health coming from. And so it sort of explains the story of where health went wrong. And I think that there was a fork somewhere in the road between medicine and science. So the feedback that I get from it is very, very positive. There's a lot of things in the book which I think people haven't thought of or are unaware of. So the book is wonderful. I really enjoy it, and I actually reread it sometimes. And I'm amazed sometimes that I wrote it because I find it fascinating because it allows us to connect the dots. And something that I always thought is that if we can't explain something, it's probably because the information that we have is either incorrect or incomplete. And to make the puzzle fit, we actually need to understand all of the pieces. And there's not that many of them, but by understanding them, you can start to heal. Because we hear so much. We hear that, you hear something and then you hear the opposite. So it becomes very confusing. So yeah, the book is actually on my site, on Janine Galizia website, not on the Get Well Fast. I'm not sure the website's even up because we've actually renamed the website after the name of the supplement that was made. And that's copper synergy because it's the synergistic elements that copper requires plus copper in the capsule. That's the one that I give my dad. So we actually changed the name of the website. And I don't think the book's even on there at the moment. So
Okay. Is there any way to purchase it?
yeah, the best way would be to actually contact me at the moment. So I can put my name in the chat. I can put the
Yes,
address
sure.
in the chat.
Yes, please. It's amazing. Janine kindly sent me a copy of it, and it's fascinating. I really enjoy it, and I have read it. I have read it several times, so I can attest that it was quite an experience. So let me adjourn the meeting. Today, it was a very special session for many reasons. The first one for your presence, the second one for our special guest today, Janine Galizia, and finally for so many new interpreters joining us. Today we have the support from English to Portuguese from Saline Santos from Brazil, as well as Denise Cipulo. From English to Spanish, Rosabel Rice, as well as Shifra Lipson and Mario Angarita. Rosabel and Shifra from United States and Mario from Venezuela. And that's it. Additional thanks to Donna G. Rodriguez, nutritionist Maria Fernanda Iturbe, Frida Rosas from Mexico, Vivian Freitas, thank you, Vivi, from Paraguay, and Patricia Gawa from Peru, from their immense daily help to our organization. They, for sure, represent a new generation of professionals committed since a very young age to their communities and the world's population. A special thanks to IT specialist David Garcia from College of Sciences and Humanities Vallejo, who edited the DF opening countdown and organizational video that I will try to reproduce in a moment. Additionally, to Norberta Rincon, who supported us with the registration to Vimeo platform. They are a source of pride for us. For sure, visit us on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, or our website, www.doctorsfederationfortheworld for more information, .org. For more information on how to become an active member, receive more news and benefits, please let us know. If you like these sessions, we strongly encourage you to become an active member. On behalf of all of us at DFW, the steering committee, staff, and translators, we thank you for your presence and questions at these sessions, and we wish you a wonderful weekend. My name is Raul Pineda from Mexico City. Any final take-home message that you would like to address, Janine, to our audience?
Yeah, it's just how fast that these conditions can be restored. They can be eliminated. The functions can be restored. People shouldn't be living with these conditions, and we're not trying simple ways because we think the conditions are complex. And I think because we think that we've been told the problems are complex, so we can't imagine that the solution is simple, but they are. They really are. I absolutely testify to it. My father can. I know many people that can. So it's worth trying, and you'll discover for yourself if that's the origin of the problem, which most of the time it is. You'll discover it for yourself that the cognition and the memory comes back.
Thank you so much, Janine. Hope to have you again in the near future. And thank you so much to our interpreters, and thank you so much to our audience for being here today. So let's see in a week or in 2 weeks' time. And thank you again, Janine, for your patience and your truly passionate and very detailed research on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.